Welcome to Wonderful Wednesday. I'm here with Laurel Kieffer, a UUC member, and we're going to talk about ecofeminism today. So Laurel, I wanted to kind of ask where you got interested. At what point did you get interested in ecofeminism, and how do you define that exactly?
I really fell into ecofeminism. I mean, I've been kind of a lifelong environmental learner, teacher through 4-H, and I was an extension agent, and we did a lot of things out in the woods. I used a lot of Stephen Motter, Sunship Earth, and kind of the 1970s environmental stuff. And so I grew up in the 60s and the 70s when I came of age, and so you know environmentalism was a big deal. And I remember participating in the first Earth Day, as a sixth grader, participating in the first Earth Day, cleaning up an area that is now a beautiful park in my hometown.
Well,
So, those are really cool things. My dad was a farmer, and he was an environmental farmer. He was one of the few folks in the area to use contour stripping with his cropping, and he got caught a lot of flack and was kind of outcast for a lot of the things that he was doing, practices he was doing environmentally and with his farm and such. But I didn't come to ecofeminism really on my own. I had been teaching at the university. I started teaching at UW-Eau Claire in 1999, and just started teaching the basic women's studies stuff. And then I'm not exactly sure what year Dr. Susan Terrell came. I don't remember. It was early 2000 somewhere. And uh, we were exploring what else I could teach, because I was teaching the basic intro, and then Sarah Harder had encouraged me to create a class on women in violence, which I did for the university.
mhm.
And then Susan was kind of saying, well, what else can you do? And I said, I have no idea. She said, well, why don't you do ecofeminism? And I said, eco what? Because I had no clue. I really didn't have a clue. So I started doing a lot of reading, a lot of research, just on what is this thing called ecofeminism, right? And started to realize that it was a lot of what I had been doing and practicing in practice, and things that I believed in. And and the definition is always evolving, and it's been evolving. I became acquainted really with a pretty solid core definition from a person named Karen Warren, and she was a professor and Macalester College in Minneapolis, and she'd written a book called Ecofeminist Philosophy, and she was a philosopher in the religion department, and had a really difficult time getting it through, because of course, when you talk about ecofeminism, you talk about you're really focusing in on the interconnectedness between patriarchal oppressions, not only on the environment, but on human others, non-human others, non-living others. And so Karen really helps us to kind of help us get this language of saying, well, what is that? It's systemic and systematic oppression. And so when you start digging into it and you kind of get down into it, and you start to see, oh my gosh, do you know that most of the radioactive places where we store and we deposit radioactive materials once they're used are on Native American reservations?
Mm.
Do you know that if you think about all of the places where the power plants are, where toxic waste dumps are, who lives in those areas? Typically people of color or people of poor. You would never see a power plant being built in Edina, Minnesota. It's not going to happen. And if you go to Milwaukee and you see where you get Cudahy and southern Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, those areas have incredibly high cancer rates, and they were working class people. So when you start to dig into it, you start to recognize that this interconnection of the impact of patriarchal entitlement, and those who have money, and typically those who are white. It's not always, but mostly those who are white and with money have all the power of deciding what happens. If you look at our soon to be past president, his efforts to undo so much of the environmental protections that are out there, and the disrespect that he's had for Native peoples. And you look at the COVID-19, who are the populations that are being most hit by that? And how do we tie that? Well, we tie that into, their living conditions. They don't have good water. They're high lead, maybe in areas with, poor water. Their asthma rates are much higher in areas where people are poor, because there's more factories and there's more auto pollution and bus pollution, and such like that. So I don't know if I'm kind of getting off here too much, but this interconnectedness between how we live, who decides who gets access to parks. People of color don't use the state parks and national parks nearly as much as white people do. So why is that? They don't have the money, they don't have transportation, they don't feel welcome. Can you imagine people of color in this day and age coming up and traipsing through our woods? I mean, even the homicides that have happened between Hmong hunters and white hunters on public lands. So you start to dig into this, and you start to see all the environmental injustices, environmental racism, environmental poverty, and those are all part of the big picture of ecofeminism.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm getting too academic here, I don't know, but I just, so then I have my little farm here, and I have this little farm that says, okay, I have the privilege of living in a space that has clean air, clean water, animals, woodlands, my own little nature park. I have the resources to be able to put up solar, and so here I am, this privileged white woman that has a really good life. I don't have any health issues. And so I have to take note of that. And I have to acknowledge that. And so I think ecofeminism forces us to really take a picture of who we are, what privilege we have, and what are the impacts of our privilege on the others, on human others being, you can use any social location you want. You can use white, you can use person of color, you can use poverty, you can use gender, you can use, any social location you want.
Right.
And so what are those impacts of my life on the others, the human others, the non-human others, my animals, the plant life, as well as the water, the topography, geography, etc. Okay. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a big subject, and I think just from the title, you wouldn't find that complexity if you didn't know that.
No, and then I even talked about the spiritual perspective of it, because then there's this whole end of the whole perspective of the spirituality, which brings in pagan, humanist, and secular humanism and pagan, and all of that starts to come into it too. And so you start reading things like Starhawk, the things that Starhawk has written, and her way of interconnecting the spiritual component, the Wicca, and all of that into the natural world. And do you respect the very life that ant that's crawling, and the respect that spider has a place, and and see the beauty of that interconnection.
You invited, or the program invited Starhawk a few years ago to come, and I remember her program was really powerful, talking about permaculture and just her own story. I wonder what has been some of the relationships and lasting impacts of having an ecofeminism course or program at UW Eau Claire previously, or I don't know if it's there currently.
Well, not this year, budget cuts and things. I'm not going to be teaching it this year, and I'm really the only one that's taught it. But I have to say that as a result of the ecofeminism class, there are certain other departments where I've had students in my class who have gone back to their departments and just done pretty intensive critical analysis of their department's approach to environment and women, and so and environmental racism and that. So I know that my work on campus certainly changed some of the curriculum, the other curriculum, and some of the other departments. I'm quite aware of that. I'm also aware that I have students who I'm still in touch with, but who have done gone on and done amazing, amazing work and have changed their focus of life to be really ecofeminist focused, and whether it be herbology, spiritual, geography, uh, uh, solar engineering, um, sustainable business, MBAs. I mean, it just the students have continued to awe me in what they have decided to do, and the master's and PhD programs they have decided to take on because of the work that we did in our class. And public health nurses, social workers, just the feedback that I get from them, 2, 4, 5, 8 years later, when we're still having contact, um, it's
Yeah.
pretty profound. It's pretty
Yeah, it's a
profound.
big message. It's I know in seminary, Carol Christ is a feminist and eco
Mhm.
feminist spiritual author, and reimagining the divine or reimagining science, or and having that lens that, like you said, that the spider has a place, that
Mhm.
feminine energy has a place, not just what's traditionally. And I don't want to get into the binaries of gender, but it's that power of personhood, and recognizing, like you said, the social locations and that, which is really neat.
And I also think that the spiritual ecofeminism allows us to get past the binaries and see the continuum of gender,
Right.
and the interconnectedness of gender and sexuality and spirituality and all of that. And one of the things that we would do with my class here on the farm was we do some earthing. And earthing is where you take your shoes off and you just ground yourself deeply into the soil and just see what happens and just let it flow, and then just and just giving students, some of the students had never been on a farm before. So you get out there and you ground them, and then we also talk about a lot about power and human entitlement power. And interestingly, like sheep don't respond very well to that. I mean, if somebody comes into there and, like, gangbusters, like a bull in a china closet, the sheep are very quick to go, no, 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 not here, not now. I'm not playing that game, and they'll go away. But if as a human we come in and we just sit in and we sit down and we are very calm and we don't want to have power, we just want to be there. Most of the time, the sheep will then come over and they'll start to nuzzle your face, they'll eat your hair, untie your shoelaces. I mean, and they just crowd around. And so there's that. I think spiritual piece of ecofeminism is not assuming that our power is really all that counts. I mean, that we need to share the power, and we need to um, share the universe, share the world, acknowledge it. And I think we get one of the things about growing up in Christianity, and I always remember, like, Psalm 8 was one of my favorite psalms. Thou hast created, just the universe and the stars and everything that's in it, and yada yada yada. And I used to be able to recite it word for word. But I was given man dominion over, and I think the interpretation of dominion over, you know, the wording, the King James, or that interpretation, when it should have, God has given us the opportunity to share this planet and to take care of it and nurture it and make it better, make it a better place, not dominate it and abuse it.
Yeah, I think a lot of progressive Christians have definitely embraced that, that creation, care of creation. I hear that sort of programming very positively featured in a lot of congregations, and I think people, um, increasingly, we have to acknowledge the impact, with climate change, and it's just so very present. I
Yeah.
I wonder, about, what do you think is the important message of ecofeminism in the here and now, in 2021 here?
So many messages. I mean, of course, in my mind, ecofeminism is the wave of feminism that we should be doing. Of course, I'm very biased about that because I don't know how we can look at feminism without taking into consideration the planet that we live on, this space that we share. And so, and that includes, I mean, how do we share these resources? We are so programmed, especially in democracies and most of democracies, into a mindset of scarcity, of a line of scarcity, or a politics of scarcity. And feminism says there's enough to go around if we're smart about this, and we take care of our resources. And I'm concerned about the water wars. I mean, water is a huge issue, and the storms, and I mean, there are still climate change deniers, and the pandemics that are coming. And you listen to people from Harvard and John Hopkins and those folks, and they're saying, oh, this is nothing compared to what's coming, the COVID, and so and that's all environmental. I mean, people were encroaching on native spaces, wild spaces. We're encroaching on wild animals. We're becoming more, I think that's a message that ecofeminism has to say, is that we got to step back, and we've got to figure out how we're going to respect, how we're going to be respectful. You think about the seventh principle of UU, and I brought that because I just want to make sure I get the right. It's like to respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. We're not separate. We are integrated. That's what ecofeminism is. And today is this respect and honoring this integrated existence that we have. And when we deny that, well, look what happens. We've got all the global climate change, pandemic, because we haven't paid attention to, we haven't respected this interconnectedness and the responsibility that it goes with respecting it and honoring.
For a young Laurel, or a young person, if you were to look back at yourself or someone now, what would you say about ecofeminism to a young person, or to a young Laurel?
I think the young people are so smart now. I mean, they get this stuff. Each year as I was teaching, the students would come in. The last time I taught, it was last spring. Each year the students come in more astute, more aware, more concerned, more anxious, more driven. At least the ones that came to my class. I know that's not everybody, but that kind of thing. But it's like, open your eyes, look around you. Open your eyes, look around. Know that you are of the soil, that you are connected to the soil, you're connected to this earth, and walk on it like it's part of you, like you belong, like it's part of your body, because it is. Whatever grows around us, or whatever, when we abuse the soil, when we abuse the land, we are hurting ourselves. And so, but again, like, the young people today are so much smarter. They're so smart, and they're so astute. Those that have their eyes open.
People talk about, I don't know, it can seem like a pretty desperate situation, but I wonder what, to use a loaded word, what salvation do you find in ecofeminism, either spiritually or just, like you said, kind of hope for the planet, hope for the future?
I think awareness. And if we can become aware and really understand the interconnectedness and the actions that we have, awareness, and then can we get angry enough, and not angry in a mean, angry way, but angry, agitated enough to take action. And I think that goes back to kind of, the 3 A's of feminism is, awareness, anger, action. And so I think, read and eyes wide open. And then I think the advice that I could possibly give is choose 1 or 2 things to focus on. Don't try to save the world, because we'll just burn out and we feel frustrated. So find 1 thing. Maybe it's plant a garden. Maybe it says you're going to go and work with a group to help eradicate invasive species. Maybe, your career is going to be environmental biology. I don't know. There's something that really speaks to your heart, and limit it, because there's some of us who have tried to take on everything, and I tell you what, it doesn't work very long, and then we feel like we've not done anything. So find 1 or 2 things that you can really and find a mentor. Someone you can count on, and someone who will help guide you when you start getting lost, feel like you're drowning.
So maybe ecofeminism is also sustainability of spirit too, and treating yourself with kindness, and like that power with that instead of power over.
Yeah, and I think Karen Warren had a really good way about five types of power: power over, power with power, power within power, power against power, and power toward power. And I think if we wanted to do a long lecture, we could go into what those all mean, right? We're not going to. But I think that there's a lot of ways that power can be really good. You can use power against something that's not good. You can join and use your power to join in and join with. You can use your power to work towards something. So, I think a lot of times we look at power as power and control as something that's bad. But I think if we think about, again, from an eco-feminist perspective, or from a feminist perspective, or from a more global perspective, or a UU perspective, I don't know, whatever, you can think about that power, the courage to use power in a way that is for the greater good is maybe, and what that greater, in an eco-feminist perspective, that greater good is incredibly inclusive. It's inclusive, and it's about the interconnectedness. And so we have to,
Well, thank you. Is there anything that you didn't say, or any last sage words you want to give us on this?
I think that we have to also be very careful that ecofeminism, like a lot of the other feminisms, does not become an elite, is not an elite white person's theory. And to be inclusive, to understand, and to not try to be the savior for those others, but to understand that there are other perspectives, and to allow those, let go, and not take control of that. And so, we need ecofeminism, I think, is a lot like you, in that we want to try to be open and respectful and inclusive. And and I think that's really important, to not let the white egocentric academic whatever mindset be the controlling factor. I mean, it's not quite the right way of saying it, but I don't know. But just get out there and be and love.